Wivo Legal Tech for Africa.
We are living through a digital gold rush, and artificial intelligence is the gold. Like all gold rushes, the first to arrive are the ones who shape the rules or break them. Today, we ask, who should govern this new frontier? Should we embrace Europe's cautious hand of regulation, or let innovation run free like the American Wild West? And in this African moment, with our own data, dreams, and destiny on the line, do we have a seat at the table? Or are we on the menu as it was in 1948 in Berlin? With us tonight is a man who has lived and led across boundaries, from the floating slums of Makoko to Global Education Summit, from chalkboards in classrooms to launching Africa's first generative AI career advisor. Hammed Kayode Alabi, a Yoruba, joins us to unpack the promises, perils, and possibilities of AI for Africa. This is Wivo Legal Tech for Africa. Let's get into it. My brother, welcome to the show. How far now?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I did. Jonathan. African now. I don't Africa. I think there's something that gets missing when we say African future, right? We need to talk about Africa now. So it's about the way we reimagine Africa now because the future that we want to create starts now. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation and what we're talking about and sharing my own experience as well with regarding AI development and all the intersection, all the intersectionality or interconnection within AI and the world as well. So yeah.
First of all, before we dive into the conversation proper, I would like you to give viewers what is it like living in Makoko? Just, I mean, for our viewers in UK here and across the world, let's get to, because we share similar backgrounds and similar history. Let people know what it is to live in places like Makoko.
I think I wrote a poem about Makoko recently because I do poetry as well. And I think I will read maybe the very first, 5 or 4 lines of the poem to kind of like, talk about Makoko in a way. So I was born as a shining starlight at the center of Makoko where people think the future may be blight. I was born as a diamond in rough, but light never fall. I picked it at the dump sites behind our house. I was molding the future from death. I was using cartons to build cars. I was playing in sands and clay to build monuments. So that's just like, very few lines of one of my recent poem about Makoko. And it shows that, whenever people come to Makoko and think that it's a place to be saved, I see it as a place not to be saved, but rather as a place to see the potential within it. When I was growing up in Makoko, like there's a place called Abete at the back of our house, like behind our house, that dump site I was talking about in my poem. So, so many deaths, people like just dump deaths there and everything there. So I and my younger brother, we go there and we just like pick deaths and want to make things, want to build things, you want to make, cars from, cartons, you're molding things, you're building things, you're just being inquisitive and creative. And many times people go there thinking that, oh, we want to save these people, not knowing that actually these young people already have something within them. It's just identifying what they are passionate about and being able to harness those potential, right? They say talent is universal, but opportunities is not. So it's not that people who are born in Makoko are not talented or they don't, know what they are doing, or the kids don't know what they are doing. It's they are harnessing that potential. And whenever I see the kind of work, there are many people who are doing incredible work in Makoko, and one of the things that I'm seeing that they are doing is, harnessing those potential that is already there. Yeah, it's difficult, it's floating slum. I was living more in the land part, but then I go to the floating area to buy fish. I would wear my pants, with my plate in my hand to go buy food, running around the streets. It was fun. People think those memories are suffering, but that was the environment we know. That was, how we can play, playing football in the streets with your bare legs, using cans to make cup. You use cans, they say pick milk cup, pick milk. So you use the can and then you use a bulb, the light bulb. You use the can and the bulb to make a World Cup, and then you wrap it with the cigar, the cigar, the wrap of the cigar, you wrap the head of the bulb, with a cup, and then, we play street competition together, and then we put like then 10 era, which is probably maybe not up to 0.1 cents. We wrap it into the cup, and we play football, the winner takes the cup. And those are the things, people don't see those things, those are the fun. It may seem that, we don't have the resources. It may seem that we don't have everything. It may seem that some people don't have all the form of education that they could get, but people were creating, people were starlights, we're shining starlights, we're enjoying those fun that comes with growing up there. But again, the people you see, the kind of, because you also like living with people where, they are drug addicts, there are people with, communal wars, street wars, street fights here and there. You could grow up to be that as well if you don't have the right mentoring, if you don't have the right mentorship. So yeah, it's for me growing up was I wouldn't say was like, to be honest, when I look back at my fun experience, they were from the slum. There were moments where, I was just carefree, I was playing, I was free, I was playing,
I,
it was
let me
at the
hold
end
it
of the
there. I
day.
mean, if we say we will talk about Makoko, I mean, we won't get here tonight. But
Yeah,
because we have time, we don't have time on our side. Let's
yeah,
start the conversation.
business,
Um,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
that let's start with setting the stage. Let's talk
yeah,
about AI itself in a global
yeah,
perspective, and the argument of whether we should allow it to roam free or whether we should tame it like Frankenstein did with his monster that he created many moons ago. So what are the key features? I mean, when it comes to regulating AI, what do you think where the globe is? Where are we as a global community? What because there's this big argument between scholars, between policymakers, between entrepreneurs like you. Some of you want it to be free. I mean, some of you want it to be innovation first. Others are looking at the inherent risk that is associated with it and are saying, no, you know what, we should give it a tap on the shoulder. So take us through what you think about, AI itself in a global perspective and whether we should regulate it.
I think before we even talk about regulation, we first need to talk about the problem that are existing. Because most of the time we like to talk about AI and we like to distance AI from what is happening in the environment. Whereas what is happening with AI is the reflection of the society. Whatever happens with AI, the way people use it, the way people create it, it's not something like people think it's new. It's not new. It's a reflection of the society. It's the reflection of our history. It's the reflection of who we are as individuals, right? And I think most of the time when we try to separate AI from the society, what we are doing is that we don't see the opportunities and we don't see the potential. So what we are trying to see now is like regulation. People are shouting regulation, innovation, all of those things. But before you even talk about regulation and innovation, you need to talk about the society first. So for me, it's like, are we producing, younger generations that are critical thinkers? Are we producing people who are reflective in their thoughts? Are we producing, people who can be kind? Are we producing people who can think about the society and the problems and the danger of the society? So when we have people like that, then we can start talking about AI, right? Because AI is the reflection of the people. So is the creator of a particular AI tool, what they think, how they kind of like create the solution, the process of at which they create the solution is dependent on their own experience with life itself. So I think most of the time we need to like disentangle that. We need to understand that you can't talk about AI without talking about philosophy. You can't talk about AI without talking about history. You can't talk about AI without talking about values. You can't talk about AI without talking about education. You can't talk about AI without talking about key things that affect our society already. So AI is not just a phenomenon on its own. It's a phenomenon that exists or that coexists within the environment in itself, within the society in itself, within our day-to-day activities in itself. So when I think about AI in a global perspective, I'm thinking about AI in a way that it reflects our own ideologies, reinforces the inequalities that already exist in the world. If somebody's making a lot of money through AI without thinking about who is being, who are the people that are going to lose in that way, it reflects, that ideology as well, right? It reflects, the inequality that is existing, if an AI is being created with a Western-led lens or with a Western-led model, it reinforces what has been happening already in the society where, culture have been transmitted through Western-led. Like we are speaking English today, that's a Western culture, right? And if we are communicating, and AI reinforces that because if AI is trained with an English model or with an English cultural model or with an American cultural model or with an European cultural lens or cultural model, it then reinforces the existing inequality that is happening in the society. So when we try to talk about AI as something that is new, I beg to disagree that even though it's a new technology, it doesn't mean, or it's a new innovation, it doesn't mean that it's just here. It reinforces some of the things that are already happening in society. And to be honest, AI is not even new because we have had several AI that has evolved over the years. So, Siri, Alexa, the old form of AI that has been created in the past, these things have been building up until now, right? So, even when we think about AI, the first thing also as well is to look at the proximal technology. So if you're thinking about regulation, you're thinking about AI in the global space, you can't talk about AI without talking about social media. People talk about AI, but then you have to talk about the proximal technology, the internet and social media that actually give the pathway to things like generative AI. Because without the internet and the likes, you won't have the Gen AI as well, right? So it's you can also talk because you know I can go on to start,
Yeah, I
discussing
get you. I get you.
several ideas.
Ahmed,
So
you spoke about um, um, taking whether the model is being built by external people. Say you mentioned the EU, you also mentioned the US, and that will be the reflection of their culture and society. But at the moment, the most of the models out there, save for few models like yours that has come from Africa, most of the other ones and the bigger ones, the ones that we are using on a daily basis, I mean, originated from the West and the
yeah.
global North. So, what influence largely? Yeah, people have been talking about data grab. People have been talking about data colonization or digital colonization. So, what influence these models have in Africa, and how these influence, would impact the continent? Would it be a positive one or a negative one? In your estimation, what do you think?
I think it's positive. I don't want to be negative or I don't want to be critical. I mean, I want to be critical rather, but I want to be nuanced in my, analysis as well, because I think if those people if they didn't create that technology, for example, it wouldn't have opened the pathway for other people as well, or opened the pathway. I understand AI reinforces some ideology already, But I also think it opened up opportunity for people as well, right? People like myself can create and ride on the existing technology because it has been created by somebody. Somebody started that. Somebody started that movement. So for me, I'm not actually taking the way, the opportunity, the fact that somebody started this movement, the fact that somebody created this, the fact that there were people who actually created this research. But I think, I'm one of the things is for us to now then reflect, right? So rather than taking a solution and saying that this is the solution, right? This is, we're just taking it, it's more or less like reflecting our own values as well. If we are taking the solution, how is it applicable to our own work? How is it applicable to our own, world? How is it applicable to our own problems and our own realities? Because I'm not gonna lie, AI has opened pathway for so many people, right? In a way, it has democratize so-called opportunities in a way. People can go on there, have access to some certain information that they would not have access to normally. It has created some pathway, like it has given power to some individuals, right? Like myself, for example, because what it did for me was like, I look at this amazing, incredible technology and I look at my local context, I look at the problem, what would have taken, a lot of money to build. I was able to use an existing model that was already out there, and I was able to use the local context and some of the work that I've done locally, and I was able to use that to train, the model to create something, right? And the whole idea is that I've created something, but somebody started that work. It wasn't just me, right? Somebody built something that I can now say that this is a technology that I can build upon. So I think what we need to start doing as Africans is not to like discard the technology and say that we want to totally build our own. It's like, okay, there's this technology there. What can we do on our own part, right? To create something for ourselves, that even the world can use. I used to say something about Rafiki that I built, which you mentioned when you were introducing me that Rafiki, it's a quiet rebellion. And the reason why I said it's a quiet rebellion is it's a rebellion against corporation. It's a rebellion against Western-led creation. That nothing good can come from the continents because there are some people who still think that way. That whenever they come here, they want to be our savior, right? Whereas we can start saving ourselves. So it's like we saw a challenge, we saw a problem that wasn't even like an African problem. It's actually a world problem. At the moment, there's a career crisis happening at the moment that children who are 15 years old do not know what to do. They don't know about their career. Like there's so much career uncertainty, and people are going to career crisis. And this is not even like a data for Africa alone. It's a global data that OECD recently released. So, and that's a problem. We also got our own local problems. And I'm like thinking, how do we create something from this? I went to search, no solution like that on the continent. Even the ones that are outside of the continent, they were things that were created where you have to log in, you go through struggle logging in, you go through a lot of hassle downloading an app. And I'm like, this is a lot of work. This is too much for people, right? So for me, it was like being able to now think about our local context, right? So for example, we've seen so many people trying to introduce AI on the continent, trying to, when people think about innovation, people think that innovation is something that is sophisticated. Innovation is something that is led, regulatory led and context led. So for example, I was thinking like, if I create this thing and I build an app or something, people are like, why don't you build an app? I'm like, I'm not interested in you building, I'm not creating anything fancy here. I want to create something that is easy to use, that is, people can understand. Entry point to technology in Africa is social media. That was how we knew, the internet. It was true, I mean, people were using the mobile phones and everything, but it was when Facebook started coming in, I remember my first day, opening my Facebook account. I remember the first time I opened Twitter, 5 years maybe later after I opened Facebook. I remember that when I opened Instagram and then got on LinkedIn and then got on all of the social media, that was our entry point. So if you're creating a solution for the continent, you need to think of the entry points to technology and how people can then start building from there. Like people have told me that they've come up with business ideas through Rafiki because it's on WhatsApp. They could chat with it. So I think for me, it's like we understanding what our local context is and we're looking at our own local work, what our work is locally and being able to use that to build something for ourselves. And, you know, and I think the data, like for example, the data we used to train, it was based on the career conversation we used to have with kids in 2017. That was many years ago. So it's people actually looking at what are the contexts, what are the things that we already have, and how do we build a model that reflects our own ideology, right? But it's not totally throwing away the technology, but building something for ourselves. And I understand that that also comes with challenges and problem, because it's not also about building AI solution. It's about some of the other things that are happening already. Lack of electricity, number one. Internet connectivity, number two. You know, the some of these, even if we want to build our own data centers, for example, we want to build our own data centers. We want to build, we need GPUs. We need processing units. We need all of those things, for our AI engineers to power some of these, large data, because AI takes a lot of energy as well, right? So all of this production requires electricity, requires data centers, requires GPUs, requires, all of these things. And those things cost a lot of money. So, and, what people are powering, what AI engineers are using to power their model at the moment is struggle, it's slow. Like the internet is naturally slow. So sometimes when we think about those things first, when people talk about AI on the continent, I'm like, yeah, it's good. I don't know if you know that we already have like some kind of like AI guidance through the AU. Yeah, the AU Agenda 2063. I think they were coming up with some guide, and I looked at the guide and I'm like, okay, this is good, but still, we need to fix the basic things first. Electricity, internet connectivity, all of those things need to be fixed first. Then before we start putting even AI into the game. But yeah, we could create something that guides people. But we need to fix some certain things, because those things then now become incentives for our creators to then start creating and building.
That's a great one. I mean, that takes us straight to the next segment of our discussion, which is our stake in the AI race. You've mentioned a lot about what you've done with Rafiki, what other people have done, and that begs the question, Hammed, sorry, is Africa, merely a consumer of AI, or can we also be at the table and shape the rules? You mentioned the AU and its policy.
Yeah.
So are we merely consumers like we were before, or should we take also the lead as others have done and be at the dinner table and make decision about this new wonderful technology?
The first question is, have we ever been at the table? I think that's the first question we need to ask ourselves. When you look at again, I like to go back to history, because, we need to historicize development. We need to, historicize AI and all of technology, because history has a way of repeating itself. So and when you look at digital technology in itself, we weren't on the table anywhere. We weren't involved. The creation of technology, the creation of internet, we were not involved. Everything was dumped to us. It's like, people keep dumping things. People keep building their own centers. Westerners keep building their own centers here. It wasn't something that was driven by us, right? And I think, one of the ways, when we say that we're not at the table, we should also blame those who doesn't invite us to the table as well. Because the first thing is that we have to create our own table first. And then once we create our own table, then people will be like, when we are forced to reckon with, people have no choice to bring us into the conversation and into the table as well. Right now people will talk about, let's talk about China, for example. Obviously China is a country, but it's gotten like over 1 billion people, almost the same number of the people we have on the continent. China is being called to the conversation because, they are leading. They are the forefront, right? They had to create their own table for them to be called into the table, or for them to be in the conversation, the world conversation. And that also needs to happen with Africa as well, right? We need to create our own table. We need to create our own agenda. We need to create our own, and I understand it's tricky, it's difficult because if you're looking at AU, for example, I think I was in a session at LSC some years ago, and the AU, you know, the states, the nation states within the AU, um, majority of them do not contribute to the AU agenda and fund it, right? So people who don't fund our own agenda, how would they even fund AI to start with? Because they've not even funded our own development agenda. The free trade, thing that was happening, I think I saw a document some years ago that the EU gave AU 21 million euros to fund that, So you can imagine if somebody is giving you money to fund your own agenda, it means that you can't control anything. So we also need to address some of these things, right? We need to address our own problems that if we want to start creating AI solution or building AI solution, there is a need for the nation states, the governments. There's a need for everybody to come together to the table to be like, these are the money, these are our own commitments, to this thing that is growing. And we want to build our own data centers. We want to build our own innovation centers. Obviously, there are some centers that are already there. There are AI labs in Makerere University. There are AI labs in the University of Pretoria. There are AI labs in another university in I think NUST, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana. And I think AIMS is also doing a lot of work around that in Ghana as well. So again, in Africa as well. So, but the whole idea is, there's all of those things there. But who is funding it? Is the question. Because if the funding is still coming from the West to create and build AI solution, and I'm also speaking to myself as a creator myself as well, right? I'm not out of it. I'm not going to say that I'm not part of the problem, because if funding is coming from the place like Google, for example, if Facebook or Meta is funding me, or if all of those big guys are trying to fund our own solution, there's a kind of a relationship there already that sort of is transactional, kind of it might not be said. It might mean that we are creating something for our continent, but there's also a lot. So we need our own investors. We need our own businessmen. We need our own entrepreneurs. We need our own governments. We need our own funding to come together. People to be like, this is the fund for Africa without external. Let us build something for ourselves. And let us find a way to build something for ourselves that promotes our own agenda. And once we start creating like that, people then will start inviting us to the table. So the first question is that, have we always been on the table? No. You see, we are the transition generation for AI. And we are not even on the table to start with. So that means that when we start seeing the impact, we might not be there. Right? So it's terrible, with some of the solution. I'm seeing so many things on Twitter recently where people are actually pulling people's clothes using Grok. They're pulling women's clothes. Like I said, it reflects the society, right? And that's what it means where we are not part of the process from the beginning. Where we are not part of the process, where we are not part of us, creating our own thing and being part of that table, being invited, as a transition generation, as people would make or break what happens with AI, we need to be at the table. But to be there, we need to start defining what our own table is, and we need to start creating our own table as well.
Ahmed, that was so brilliant. I don't know if it's as if you are an inspirational speaker or a soothsayer. But you mentioned progress. In as much as we are not at the table, and in as much as it's not our funding, we are not making the decision. As the saying goes, "He who pay the piper dictate the tune." Nonetheless, you mentioned great development at Makerere, at Pretoria, at Legon, and elsewhere. How do you measure this? How is AI impacting, especially education and employment in underdeserved communities. I mean, but this funding is bringing the technology closer to us,
Yeah.
to people like you from Makoko, to people like me from Frabe.
Yeah.
You know, so how is the let's discuss a bit about the positive side of it.
Yeah, I think, one of the things, so I was in Makoko last year, November, and then I've not released Rafiki. We're still like in the build stage, we're still like building. But I tried something, when I went there, I worked with some kids they've never had about ChatGPT before. This were like, we were just chatting and, like, have you heard about ChatGPT? They said, no, we have not heard about ChatGPT. So this was like, Makoko Dream Foundation School, that's founded by, my very good friend, Emmanuel, who's a great guy. And he had laptops for these kids, and he brought out the laptops for them. It's like, Uncle is going to teach you something, and we had about ChatGPT. They said no. So I'm like, okay, let's start. Guys, type ChatGPT on Google. They did, they opened the app and they started typing. So we did something. I'm like, um, so as we're typing, I've forgotten the first prompt, I think we're looking at soil and, the type of soil, and they saw 7 types of soil. And one of them said, oh, uncle, I used to think there are 3 types of soil. I never knew that there were more. I'm like, yeah. And then before you knew, she's already searching. Oh, and then we started discussing, like, oh, I don't understand this particular soil. There's a soil called maybe chalky soil or something. I can't remember even the name myself. And I said, okay, prompt it and say that, can you explain to me like a kid, or like a 5-year-old? And then she typed it and then it gave her an answer. And before you knew, she started exploring on her own. And, one of the things that I learned from there is that a prompt in the hand of a child in a place like Makoko, February, like you mentioned, could change the world in a way. It's a single prompt, it's a simple prompt, but that prompt becomes an exploration. So when I created Rafiki, even though he's providing career advice, a single prompt into the hand of a young person that is curious, could create something. Obviously, it needs, guidance as well, right? You need people to be there, you need people to support. But I think the fact that it's opening doors for those opportunities to happen. And for me, it's like I said, it's more of a quiet rebellion for me. I'm taking a stand that I want people to have access to this. That's why it's not a for-profit, it's non-profit, That's why it's like access matters to me. That's why it's like going into those communities to do outreaches, to teach people how to prompt, right? Because I understand that once people understand prompting, once people understand that single power that they have in their hands, once people understand that this is the power I've gotten, they can explore and create things. You see, sometimes the reason why people cannot create things is because they don't have access to the information, they don't have access to the tools. But if you can bring the tools closer to them, then you see the magic happens. People will start searching. Like I said, somebody created a business from Rafiki. It was shocking. This was something that wouldn't have happened before. People are coming up with ideas, from.
Ahmed, can I hold you there? Can you please tell people about Rafiki? I mean, we've been
Okay.
talking, yeah, we've been talking about Rafiki.
Yeah, and I need to
What's
offer context,
what
right?
is Rafiki?
Yeah, so Rafiki AI is a generative AI career advisor and counselor that provides, career advice in like under 1 to 2 minutes. You can chat with it 24/7, but under 1 to 2 minutes, you can actually get like a career advice and create a career pathway plan using Rafiki. So you can start exploring like your interest, strengths, even some of your weaknesses and some of the things you enjoy doing, and then he could use those conversations to come up with a career path for you that you can start exploring. So the whole idea is not to give you a singular career path and be like, this is your career path. No, that's not the goal. The goal is to open up, career exploration, right? Is to open up your ideas, and that happens on WhatsApp. So it's a journey. I just consider it as a career GPT in a way, that has been trained on career, and it's on WhatsApp, right? Or ChatGPT for career, which is not the usual GPT, but it's been trained in a way that it drives conversation around your interest trends and help you figure out, what pathway to follow, and you could start exploring from there. So That's what Rafiki
A
does.
follow
And
a follow up question.
yeah,
How would, because most of my viewers are lawyers, how would they
yeah.
benefit from Rafiki? I mean, it's a career advisor. How would lawyers benefit from Rafiki?
Yeah, again, obviously, I think there are like some AI legal tools that people have been creating already. So I don't want to like, say that this is a legal, AI tool in its own. But I think, in terms of like their own area of interest. So if there's a type of law you're interested in, or if there's a type of law you're exploring, or if there's a type of career you're exploring in law and you're thinking of like, are there, because again, like I said, sometimes the kind of environment you're in, you're limited to some certain career and you don't understand that you can actually explore, right? So I think what Rafiki does is that it allows you to explore a wide range of careers as well, right? So in terms of like your area, so if you're thinking of like law and content, right? I know a guy who is like a content creator and is a lawyer. I know a guy who is a skit maker that is a lawyer, and using that to communicate and educate people, right? So, and educating people about the law, so it allows you to like figure out, a path and what are the pathways and what are the ways to explore those pathways as a lawyer. So maybe if you're thinking of like, your legal career and you're thinking, how do I expand my opportunities as a lawyer, because if you're thinking that you can do much more than appearing in court, there could be more things to do, right? So I think that Rafiki could be a place to go to explore that, because as I understand, we are now in the generation where you can't be caged into one thing, or you can't be caged into a certain thing, of your area of interest. You can explore. One of the things that I used to talk about is that we now live in a world of, we used to live in a world of plurality, but now we are now living in a world of specialization, which is great, but it's also harmful for growth. So I think one of the things that Rafiki does is to help you explore that plurality, right? So if you're a lawyer and you're thinking of exploration in that field, within that interest, I think Rafiki could help.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, at least we've got that in the post now. So let's viewers, if you're just joining us, this is your program Legal Tech for Africa with me, Mohammed Wuriba. Today I'm with the great guy from Makoko, the beautiful state of Lagos, Nigeria, Hammed Kayode Alabi, and we're discussing where are we now with AI, whether we should regulate it or not from an entrepreneur's point of view, from a businessman's point of view, from a developer's point of view, and also from the people who, propagate and make these models available to us. Ahmed, we've discussed a lot. We've discussed about Rafiki, which is your model. We've discussed about the potential AI has, especially with employment and education. I want to ask a question now to you. I want to put this to you. What role should African youth and entrepreneurs like you play in the policy debate? Or, as you said, if we decide to get our own table, our own dinner table, what role should you guys play? Where do you come in?
Mm, mm. I think before I go there, when you were recapping again, I was just thinking, should we regulate AI?
Yes,
Yes,
that was my that was
yeah,
the follow up question, or
yeah,
probably I have
yeah,
put the cat before the horse. But whatever
yeah.
it
So
is, um,
I was just thinking,
should we?
should we
Okay, let's
regulate?
start with that. Let's start with that.
Should we? Should
My
we?
bad.
Should we?
Should we?
Yeah,
Should we regulate AI? Should we give it a free pass, or should we
I
call
think
the parliamentarians to make laws about it?
I think yes and no. I'm still in the middle around regulation, and because we don't want to put a cap into something that is still growing, that allows people to build and create, that allows people to innovate. Because when you look at it, like Europe is very strong on regulation, but if you look at the challenges, is that even though they're regulated, what is happening is that then it's stifling innovation, right? It's kind of like stifling people from building things. People are not really creative with it, right? So it's affecting the innovation, the idea, the creativity around it. I still feel like even though everybody's using AI and all of those things, but it's still in the early stage, right? We still have like, so people are still building and creating. And I think quick regulation will then affect that creativity process. But again, we need to put guardrails. I think that's what we should do. We should put guardrails. We shouldn't stop people from innovating. Rather, the people who are innovating should make sure that there are guardrails. So guardrails is like if somebody presses something that is going to trigger,
Ahmed, I'm very sorry. Let me hold you there. That's a very beautiful point. But please permit me.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's okay.
Now you are suggesting that we give the power of regulating to you guys. I mean, by putting guardrails. And again, you something came to my mind when you were submitting. You said what came to my mind was the risk of premature regulation versus the risk of the legal vacuum of not regulating, with all the risk attached to AI, with emphasis to Gen AI. So now, do you think, given that, I want us to take a case study now. Let's consider Elon Musk with Grok. Now, at the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned Grok, and you mentioned how people are being undressed with Grok. Do you think we should give that power, that enormous power, to you guys, you making these tools to regulate AI, rather than the people that this AI would would affect, or the people that would be interrogating with this AI? I mean, why their representative not given that power to make that decision?
I think one of the things, when it comes to design or when it comes to creating a solution, is to have the people in mind. So, you don't just create, the first thing in design thinking is empathy. And when you think about empathy, it's like you're designing thinking, you're standing in the shoe of other people as you're building. So the reason why I said, individuals should think about guardrails and all of those things is because you need to think about the consequences too, right? And I think that's why I kind of like love a bit of EU regulation around like when you kind of like create something that damages the society, you pay some certain fine, like you actually like, you would be punished, I think they actually created a risk of AI risk in a way, low, high. There's even one where you're like, you can't at all, right? Which is good, but again, too much of it might affect the individual. So I first think that the process, determines the outcome as well, right? So what's the process of building? What's the process of engagement, right? When you look at a nation that is more of like, capitalist driven, the individual has the power. So the individual having the power, it's more or less like the individual actually like thinking of like what are the consequences, what are the ethical consequences. So I would say that one of the things we need is we can have some acts, but we can have some guidance as well, right? This is the guidance around producing or innovation, right? You have to engage, you have to think about the ethics, you have to think about all of those processes. When you think about research, when we do research, we have to do ethics, you have to go to ethical approval. So you're building a particular solution, right? You're writing the solution, the innovation in a way that it considers the ethics and it considers the ethics of the work and everything. And you're building this, and you're not just ticking the boxes. You're not saying that I'm just building this ethics without engaging. You're building the ethics and you're actually implementing it. So that when somebody says, can I off somebody's clothes? Using Grok, for example, there's a guardrail on the system says that this is not allowed. This is considered this, right? But so I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. So
I get you now that we are on the same place. You've also by way of going around agreed that yes, we should give some sort of. I'm coming. We should consider some sort of regulation. Just 1 minute. because of time, I may have to be jumping in now. So
Yeah.
now, what role do you guys play? I mean, you the developers and the
Yeah.
entrepreneurs. Where how do you come in? Because you suggested that we should give that power to you, but now you've
Yeah.
agreed also. Okay, we can compromise. The power can be with the
Yeah.
parliamentarians. Yeah, understand, as well as you guys. So what role do you play in the policy making?
So when I say that the power should be to the individual, I'm not saying that the power should automatically just be within an individual within the regulation. Is that there should be a rule that allow that fair playing ground, and which is like the rule around the true capitalism before some set of human beings decided to be like, we have to keep it to ourselves, right? So it's like, you have to play within the rules of the game. You have to innovate within the rules of the game. You have to create within the rules of the game, right? You have to, you know, if you're creating anything, and again, this is not even just AI, it's just principles around innovation and creation. One of the things I used to argue that, if somebody is saying that, oh, social entrepreneurship is different from a business, I'm like, see, guy, every solution should serve people, even though it's a business, right? Every entrepreneurship should be social. Like if you're creating anything, who are you serving? Are you serving the people or are you serving yourself? So those are like the questions, right? And for me, it's like, within the purview, within the rules, individuals should be able to take action. And one of the things that I kind of like, came to recently is that when we even think about the individual, the analysis, the unit of analysis of an individual creating something, you see, there's a difference between individuality, individualism, and individual responsibility. Even though like those things, those three things, they might seem the same, but there's also they are connected, but they also you need to also separate them first. So individual responsibility is saying that I'm responsible for my society. I want to create something good for my society. When I create this thing good, it's going to be good for me, it's going to be good for my society, and it's going to be good for the world and the global community. That's individual responsibility. That is good. So if somebody is coming to create an AI with the framework of individual responsibility, they will consider ethics, they will consider guardrails, they will do the right thing. Individuality is,
Yeah, but Elon Musk. Let's go back to Elon Musk. Elon Musk did not consider that all you're saying, when making Grok. And we have examined at school, we have examined Grok a lot, and one thing we've discovered is that the regulation by design, which most of you entrepreneurs are suggesting, has an enormous risk, a risk of, because one thing you should know for developers and entrepreneurs, the goal is to make profits. The goal is to make more money, rather than rather than looking out for protection. So
yeah,
but I think we're running out of time. So and we have other things to discuss. But
yeah, okay.
can you please you from your CV, I deduced that you worked with KLCI and Skills to Rural. And can you tell us how those local solutions which you emerged from those experience inspire or can inspire policy making?
Yeah, again, I think, one of the things I used to talk about policies is that most of the time policymakers like to work on their own. They like to work in isolation and they like to come up with new solution, new ideas, and like sometimes when you're trying to come up with solution, or they like to stick to their own solution. Sometimes some of these solutions are solutions that have been created by young people. So, why can't you like come together and co-opt some of this solution already that are already existing and work with young people already? So when it comes to like ideas like skillsura.org or Rafiki AI, for example, or the work we do at KLCI, these are like solutions that was created by us young people. Like it was like a youth-led organization, right? It was young people coming together to drive, create a platform where children can develop solutions to their own problems. So imagine if a government is trying to like create an entrepreneurial spirit within the students or within the school. All they need to do is to work with organizations such as ours, come together, let's create a policy together, let's cascade this together, right? So most of the time when people are beginning to like look for new solutions or look for new ideas, I'm like, there are already young people who are already doing this within the community. So it's about coming together to work together to actually scale them. And I can say that from my work. So recently, we recently got an approval from the Kwara State Ministry of Education to, promote our work and promote Rafiki AI across schools and the states in Nigeria, and I think that's an example of how, policymakers and younger people can come together and work. As younger generation, as younger people, we have the innovation, we have the ideas, we have the movement. I think we can build and create things that can be adopted by the government, and we can work together towards driving innovation. But I also think that one of the things is that the government needs to also be open to those ideas and innovation for it to be spread. Because whenever you think about skill, whenever you still think about innovation, whenever you still think about change, the government is like the duty bearers of change, because they are able to do it at a level of scale that individual will not be able to do that, right? Except even if you're a business person, you still have to find a way to work with the government in a way. So for me, I feel like, it's that, one of the things that I have all the belief is that, I want to build something that inspire other people to be like, I want to be part of something bigger. And if by working and building all of those things, I'm inspiring other people like the government to be like, want to be part of this, then so be it.
That's perfect. That's super perfect. Ahmed, thank you very much. I mean, that's a great insight. Viewers, if you're just joining us, with Hammed Kayode Alabi, and we are discussing AI go in the gold rush, whether we should regulate it or not. And of course, the preliminary question has been answered. Ahmed has agreed with me. Yes, there should be some sense of regulation. Where we have some divergence is the method of regulating it. He's suggesting more of a regulation by design, which I think we can have a blend, like the GDPR, which the European Union has on data protection. It's a blend of, it's a mix of everything. I think we can meet at a junction. There's a possibility for us to meet at a junction. Anyways, before we go, Ahmed, there is one more thing I want us to talk about before we close the curtains for today. I want us to talk about data sovereignty and local realities. This is my dissertation area. This is my research. So I can't leave you without talking about it, without getting your insights. And from this session, I'll go now to my computer and type what you said. Yes. So the first question I want to ask: should African countries, especially for us here in the West, within the ECOWAS region, should we build our own data sets and regulatory frameworks? Because there is this issue of, I mean, giving all our data to these global empires, Google, Meta, and Apple, and all the other players. Do you think it's high time for us? I mean, of course, there will be an answer of resources. There will be a consideration of getting the fund. But do you think it's high time we get our own data centers, probably in Accra or in Lagos or in Freetown? Is it the time for us?
I think yes. I mean, I'm not a fan of algorithm colonization. I think there's a time like that where your data is being used to, not for the benefits of you, but for the benefits of the other people, right? For the other party, and that's what algorithm colonization does, right? When you give your data to a company, when you give your data, it's like, okay, how can we sell it to you? How can we make this something that we can promote to you so that you can start paying money? So it's not really for our own good, of our own development, right? Like I said, we need to start creating our own table. So I think we need to create our own data framework. To be honest, we are not still good with data protection to start with, to be honest. Like, you see the way many data have been displayed out there. I saw something recently that happened on the internet. A person shared a story of they went to renew their passports. Their collection slip was found with somebody selling bean cake on the streets. So that means somebody have sold those paper. You remember back in the days where we sell papers to people to be like, you can use it to sell things. So those culture are still existing in a way, right? So in that way you can, and also the fact that, there's no synchronization of data. So there's a lot of like, different, you get, for example, in Nigeria, I can use Nigeria as an example. You do like a driver's license, you do a voter's card, you do a national identity card, you do a passport, you have all of these things there, right? And there's no one singular ID that you can point to as the major ID that says that we actually have the data of our population and we know about it and we know how we can make decisions, locally about that, right? But then we have these Western moguls and companies who are actually have this data and they can say that, and they can start even giving, sometimes you'll be surprised that even the West might know some certain things about us without us even knowing because they've already gotten into the data, right? Because data also helps you to predict, like that's why we have predictive analysis. It helps you to predict patterns, it helps you to predict all of those things. And if we don't have those culture already, it's also even about sharing. How do we even share data as well? I think the data culture isn't there. So the first thing is that we need to first cultivate the data culture locally. I think once we start cultivating data culture locally, and again, like I said, it starts with education. If people cannot question, how are you going to use my data? What are you using my data for? Oh, I don't want to consent to this because I don't know how you're going to use my data. I don't know what you're using it for, right? So those are the questions. People don't know that, their data is for them, like they own it, it's their right, right? So data rights is like, so the first thing is that even before you start building data centers, because you could build data centers and still people will just like do whatever they like. So the first thing is to educate people about data, about their information, about protecting their information, and about taking responsibility for protecting people's information. Because one of the things that we talk about is that we talk about rights, but we don't talk about responsibility. If you're talking about rights, somebody is responsible for that right. So it's responsibility as well. So we can't talk about data rights without talking about data responsibility. So who is going to be responsible if something happens? If somebody sees my slip somewhere, who takes that responsibility? So I think, again, defining those kind of rules, I don't feel that we should be following or copying and pasting, you know, what works somewhere else. And maybe we want to open our data up, in a way, maybe that's our culture, maybe because we love sharing, we love our neighbors, maybe we love, so maybe we need to define that as well locally, within our own rules, within our own spheres of sharing, that if we are sharing, what are the rules for us for sharing that data because we want to support or help each other? But then we still need to think about, like I said, individuals can be powerful, but they can also be dangerous. So I think it's redefining what data means for us. But I think there's still a lot of education to be done around data privacy and people don't even know the meaning of end-to-end encryption. Those things. People don't know. I just want to chat. People share your contact anyhow. It's just there.
Ahmed, I mean that's the sad reality. But before you go, let's see if we can get some comments from our viewers on Facebook. Most of the most of the comments that are coming today are complimentary comments. And I mean, we do not have much, we don't have questions and interrogations today, but there are so many congratulatory notes, especially to the program. Mariam Fatima Kabiru Mansari highlighted that this is a very educational and informative. Kudos to you. And the other congratulatory notice from Abdurrahman Jalo Sedete J. And we also have Ahmed Sheku said this is brilliant. We have Maria Makuruma who congratulates. Of course, us. So yeah. So I mean, most of the comments we've been getting from our viewers on Facebook, basically, congratulatory notes to the program and to you as well for joining us, Hamid. Before you go, Hamid, what would be your give me one message to African policymakers on AI governance and one hope for Africa tech-driven future?
For the governance, let's create our own table, like I said. Let's build our own table. It's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, but we can be at the forefront of those innovation and of AI. I think, AI is something that has come to be like, we can own it, we can create our own. I feel like it's, I'm an optimist about AI. I'm not a pessimist about it. I think I'm always very skeptical about ideas. I can be a pragmatic at times, but for the first time, I'm an optimist about an idea, and I think we could ride on this. We could ride on this, and the future. I think one of the things I'm looking forward to is Africans creating for Africans. We need to start creating for ourselves and African creating for the world. Enough of people creating for us and asking us to be consumers and users of technology. We need to be creating our own technology and using it. I feel jealous of Chinese when they use WeChat a lot, and I had to download WeChat and chat with them, right? And they have to chat with each other using WeChat. What if you have our own chat in Africa, right? I'm looking forward to that world where we can, because I think that's the real Ubuntu. That's the real, I am because we are creating something for each other, for supporting each other, for supporting each other's growth. And then our resources can stay within the continent rather than, our resources going outside of the continent and our resources and funding and money going outside of the continent. And maybe we could then start, exporting some of those things and not being a user alone. I'm not saying we shouldn't import things too, but I think there should be a blend of that so that we can also be in the position where we can control. And we've gotten the population. The Africa has one of the youngest population in the world, and it's going to grow. I think by 2050 that maybe 1 in 3 person in the world is going to be an African. So I don't know if the data is correct. I might be saying something wrong, but one of the things that I'm looking forward to when Africa rises, I think we're already rising. And yeah, so I think that's what I'm going to say. And I think you need to take this to LinkedIn as well, because I think the Facebook guys are enjoying all of this. I think, LinkedIn also needs to listen to this live and, and benefit from it. So looking forward to when you will democratize to other platforms, specifically LinkedIn, because that's the platform I love as well. But it's good to have such a program continuing, like having such a program on Facebook. I was thinking maybe Facebook is going nearing its end with things like this, but it's good that you're bringing this to the forefront of Facebook, and because I know the people who are going to listen are actually there as well. So thanks for running this and for having this kind of conversation. Thank you.
Ahmed, all thanks must go to you as well for, given your busy schedule. I know how busy you are coming to the program to join us, to enlighten us with a great insight. I'm also looking forward to you being employed at Rafiki. I'm jobless at the moment. I'm looking for a job. I wish to work with you, and you. I think
significant funding, and then
no,
we can employ you.
I hope you're looking for a policy compliance officer or a policy officer, whatever it is. Nonetheless, thank you very much. Thank you so
Thanks so
much for.
much, man.
Thank you, viewers. If you're just tuning in, we have been in the company of Ahmed Kayode Alabi, who has been giving us an insight of the AI gold rush, whether we should regulate it or not, from an entrepreneur's, from a developer's, and from a businessman's point of view. Ahmed, of course, is the founder of Rafiki AI. Rafiki AI is a wonderful tool for career advising. If you can go now and check it, and then you'll see how I have already checked it, and I know how powerful it is. And these are the kind of people we are looking for in the continent: people that can innovate, people that can create, as he said, so that Africa must start having its own. We should stop relying on these big tech companies here in the West. So thank you very much for all of you that's tuning, that's joined in, from our viewers on Facebook, and for the other people that may watch this video later, that will be shared in other platforms. Thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you again next Friday, the same time, the same place. I have been your humble host, Mohamed Wuriba, signing out.
Okay.